So my name is Sharon Erickson. I'm a Master Gardener volunteer here in Santa Clara County, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's session. On behalf of UC Master Gardeners at Santa Clara County, I want to welcome you to getting fruit trees off to a good start. The University of California Master Gardener program extends research-based information about home horticulture and pest management to the public. Tonight's program is being co-sponsored by the Palo Alto Library, and we're grateful for their support. Now, with all of that, I'd like to introduce your presenter for this session, Don Bollinger. Don has been a UC Master Gardener since 2017. He's the orchard lead at our demonstration garden at Martial Cottle Park in San Jose. And in Don's hands, you're in very capable hands. Don, why don't you go ahead and get started?
All right, thank you very much. And hi, welcome everyone. Wow. I usually do talks like this to about 20 people live face-to-face. I see 258 right now, 260 and counting. So this is pretty amazing. We probably won't be able to get to all the questions, but I will try to answer questions as we go along. Sharon will be keeping an eye out for that. So yeah, I am the orchard lead at the demo garden at Martial Cottle Park. So Martial Cottle Park is a fairly new county park in South San Jose, for those who don't know. And the Master Gardeners have about 4 acres of that park that we're doing demonstration gardens of all sorts, veggies and melons and flowers and native things and pollinator things. And I'm running 3/4 of an acre as an orchard. So this is a view from the center of the orchard toward the east. And just to get used to my cursor, the tree I'm circling here is a Alberta peach, which is going to show up again and again in this conversation. The orchard is less than 2 years old. That is 2 years ago this winter, we planted our very first trees. So all the trees you see here are, this summer, this fall, they're less than 2 years old. This is their second year of growth. So I am personally quite surprised how well they've done. And I'll be basically talking today about what we did to get them to grow this well. So what we're going to do in the talk here, I'll tell you what we're going to talk about and what we're not. I'll tell you where to plant your trees, what kind of trees to plant, how to plant it, how the first year is going to go. Actually, just changed the order today. Then we'll talk about the second year. Then we'll talk about pruning. Finally, pests, diseases, and problems. We will not be going into detail on very many of these things because each one is their own talk. But we will get you started. I'm going to be doing this at a fairly simplified level. My assumption is there are people who are into all the details, and they will, you will look up everything, and that's excellent. That's what I'm going to point you to be doing. I'm aiming at the quick look here to give you confidence that you can do this, but I'm not going to get into very many details. All right, so what we're talking about today is fruit trees. So I'm not going to talk about nuts, shade trees, native trees, the tree out by your street side, all cool stuff, all good topics, things that we talk about as Master Gardeners, but we're on fruit trees today. So not berries, not pumpkins. I did take a top 10 pumpkin to Half Moon Bay in 2019, but we're not talking about pumpkins today. My wife said, don't talk about pumpkins. We'll talk about palms, stones, and citrus, which is a sort of fancy name, but turns out it's hard to come up with another way of saying apples and pears, which is what palms are, stone fruits, so that's your cherries, peaches, nectarines, apricots, prunes, pluots. So these two are basically what you think of as fruit trees, and citrus, we'll talk about that as well. Oranges, lemons, limes, grapefruit, things like that. Lovely grapefruit picture in the upper right here. We'll see it again at the end. I have taken one of those grapefruits off the tree. This is off my 2-year-old grapefruit tree in the orchard. That's a pretty fine grapefruit there. We'll talk about in the ground. I'm sorry, not much about potted trees. That's another great topic, but not the one I'm covering today because we planted these things in the ground. In your yard, the whole idea is this is how you can grow them. So I'm not focused on how an orchard would do it and how, a big commercial orchard. We space things closer together. We're growing things short to demonstrate how you would want to do it in your yard. And we're only talking about the first 2 years just because there's more than enough to talk about, and that's what we have in the orchard right now. Is it's 2 years old. So we don't even actually have almost any fruit. This grapefruit is an exception. It sort of slipped by me, and before I could, it got too big before I could take it off. But in the first 2 years, we're not expecting fruit on our fruit trees. All right, so this is what we're covering today. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. My 5 key points. These are the 5 things I want you to walk away with if you don't remember anything else. The first is everything you need to know is at the California Backyard Orchard. This is an online resource at homeorchard.ucanr.edu. And it literally has everything I'm going to talk about and a lot more. This is aimed at the backyard in California. Sorry, anybody from Washington. Hi, Sue. This is not really quite right for Washington, but you get some good ideas. This has all the answers. It's easy to access, so it's got site considerations. You can see all the things here on the right. I'm only doing where to plant it, which one to plant, and how to plant it, the first year care, irrigation, and pruning and fertilization, and not the rest of these, and pests. So I took about half of these topics. The next thing you need to know, 6 to 8 hours of sun. If you're trying to grow fruit trees and you don't have 6 to 8 hours of sun, if you're putting in the shade of some tree, you're putting it on the north side of your house, too close to the house. If you can't give your tree 6 to 8 hours of sun, you're going to be disappointed. The tree is going to grow poorly, it'll be spindly, and if it grows fruit, it will be disappointing fruit. Really important to remember, the whole point of growing fruit trees is to capture sunshine and turn it into sugar. That's what a fruit tree does, is it captures sunshine, those leaves turn that sunshine into sugar and route it to the fruit, and then we get to pick and eat it. So if you're not getting enough sun, you're not getting enough sugar, it's going to be disappointing. I really want to talk about water, so I got 2 topics on water. How much, right? Too much is obviously bad because it rots the roots out. Not enough water is bad because the tree won't prosper or even will die. It's not hard to figure out the right amount. I'll tell you exactly how to do it. You want to put the right amount on and without interruptions. So we've been watering every 3 days from about April till November. The amount changes a little bit during the course of the year, but every 3 days without interruption. When I go on vacation, the timers keep on going. It's without interruption. And this is really important because if you're watering your trees by hand and they're doing nice and you're going along, and then you go on vacation at the end of June and you leave for 2 weeks and the trees get dried out, they won't die, but they will sort of go dormant. They'll sort of stop growing, and no amount of water is going to get them going again. If you keep watering them steadily, regularly, all summer, all fall, they will keep growing. It has amazed me, like I said, how much these trees have grown in just 2 years at the park. And finally, I'm going to talk about growing trees short because they're easier to manage. We intend to keep every tree in the orchard, well, almost. We have a back row of trees we're going to let be tall, but other than that, everything is 8 feet or less. I actually did a talk last year about how tall they're going to be. I just stand up and put my hand straight up. If the tree is taller than my hand, it's too tall. A lovely short lady asked me, how tall are they supposed to be? After the talk, we were out in the orchard, said, how tall should they be? I had her put her hand up, right? So her trees are going to be 7 feet tall. If you need a ladder, I think it's too tall. So when I talk about pruning, I'm going to talk about only one way to prune, and that is short and wide. So we capture all the sunshine, but don't go too high. Okay, so these are the 5 key things you got to know. Everything you need is on the California Backyard Orchard. Got to have sun, got to have the right amount of water, never stop, and short trees are easy to manage. Okay, so Sharon, any questions I need to stop for right now?
No, not right now. Nothing
Okay.
relevant.
Yes, pomegranate tree too. If you can't reach it, it's too hard. You're going to capture all the sun you need at 8 feet. I'm sorry, I'm answering a question I see in the chat. Do we need to prune pomegranate? Do we need to prune a pomegranate tree to 8 feet? You don't need to, but you can. It will do just fine. It will produce very nicely, and you'll be able to reach the pomegranates.
And Don, this is Sharon. I should have said they're perfectly relevant questions, but nothing you need to cover right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to everyone who just got your question didn't get asked. We've figured this out in advance, and I'm going to sort of keep going unless it's right on target and current. Where to plant your trees? Okay, so first, we have this little top 5 thing. Those are the things we really need to remember, right? 6 to 8 hours of full sun. So you're going to pick a place for your tree that's got sunshine from the time it blooms until the time you pick it. Which I'd always heard, just 6 to 8 hours of sun. But in fact, in the winter, you might be getting more shade because the sun is lower. That's okay because you're not capturing sunshine and turning it into sugar in the winter for palm and stone fruits. More sun is better. We're literally, like I said, turning sunshine into sugar. Citrus is actually, is now. Citrus is still making fruit right now. So citrus trees do need that 6 to 8 hours of sunshine year round, okay? At Martial Cottle Park, we're planting them about 12 feet apart. So in your backyards, you're looking for the space. You want to figure out how many trees you can plant, how much space it takes. There's a lot of choice here. You don't have to, 12 feet is not magical. In commercial orchards, they tend to be more like 15 feet apart, and the rows are more like 20 feet apart. So there's a lot more room in a commercial orchard. We wanted more varieties to packed in, which I assume in your backyard, you'll like more varieties and not necessarily great big trees. So you might like 12 feet. If you put them too close together, you're going to need to prune them more to keep them under control so they're not getting in each other's way, but that's very doable. Spread them out wider, that's fine, but you're going to have, if you want to keep them 8 feet tall and yet 20 feet wide, they're kind of going to get, the branches might get too heavy and they might fall down. You need some upward angle to your branches. So there's a limit to how wide you can go if you don't let them go high as well. You don't want your tree competing with water for other things. This was something I hadn't realized, hadn't thought of until I got my Master Gardener training. In the middle of the lawn is really not an ideal place to put a fruit tree. It wants a pretty considerable amount of water. It wants about as much water as a lawn does for the amount of space it's covering. If you water your lawn, it's going to get the first water, right? It's going to grab it first on the way down. So your tree is going to get what's left. You almost have to put twice as much water on to get past the lawn, get the water down past the lawn's roots and down to where the tree can get it, but the lawn isn't going to steal it out. I have, for 3 years now, since I became a Master Gardener, I have been expanding the ring around my trees so that there's less grass and more bare soil so the tree can, basically get its water. If you see this picture at Martial Cottle Park, there's no grass, no weeds, nothing but trees, which is really ideal. And there's also a lot of compost out there that we'll talk about later. Trying to squeeze it in on the roots of that big redwood tree. Redwoods reach wide. Under the oak tree, these are not good places to put to try to put your fruit tree. But I understand your backyard's small, so do the best you can. And finally, warmer is better when you're planting your trees, especially for citrus. The palms and the stone fruits aren't particularly susceptible to cold, but particularly for citrus, the south side is warmer, the west side is warmer. Heat's good for citrus in the summer and the winter. The best grapefruit grow in the hottest places. And cold air, that is, say, frost sinks, it finds low spots. So if you have a choice to make, don't put your tree at the lowest spot in your yard, especially a citrus tree. If there's a hill that flows down and then hits a wall, the bottom of that hill, that wall, is going to have cold air piling up on it. Surprisingly enough, the climate is different. You'll have citrus trees that get frost there and no place else. So warmer's better. Okay, so that's where to plant. Let's see. I'll just keep moving on.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in about watering, but I think you're going to be covering
Water's coming.
it later.
Right. Water is specifically covered, so we'll get to that. The next thing you do is choose your tree. What kind of tree do you want? First and most important thing, far and away, is why are you growing fruit in the first place? Presumably you like it. You want to eat it. So pick the fruit you like to eat. I particularly like the stone fruits. Someone else was big on the apple trees, got us a bunch of apple trees in the orchard. Citrus is great for year round. It has fruit when the others don't. So pick the fruit that you like to eat. Next, check the chill hours. This is a sort of, can be a nerdy kind of topic. Lots of discussion, very little agreement, even in the crew at Martial Cottle Park, of how many hours of chill we get. We actually have the weather system up there and we have all the data and we track it, but there's different ways to track it. And I'll give you a real simple, this is a simple version of the whole talk. 700 hours or less works best here in Silicon Valley. If the tree wants more chill hours and doesn't get them, its flowers are going to come out kind of erratically, because that tree wants to live in Minnesota and it knows that if today's weather shows up, that's just a fluke. If it hasn't had its 900 hours of coldness, it's going to keep waiting for the cold before it starts coming out to bloom. Whereas a 300-hour chill tree is nicely tuned for Southern California. When it starts getting warm, it's going to start blooming because it figures it's time. So I will show you some labels in a minute. The label will say how many hours. 700 or less is going to work better here. Even under 500 is probably better, but I am not convinced it's a critically important thing to, if this one's 700 and that one's 600, it doesn't mean the 700 is a lot worse or the 600 is a lot better.
John,
yeah.
Just sorry to break in. Could you explain chill hours once more?
Yes, roughly. So chill hours, first of all, the important thing is it will show up on the label. See right here, it says 700 hours on this Bing cherry. That means this cherry needs a certain amount of coldness. 500 hours over here on this Fantasia nectarine. So the important thing is look for that number, 700 or less. What it actually means is how many hours below 45 degrees and maybe above 32, that's questionable. But how many hours of cold, 45 to 32 degrees, there have been between November 15th and March 15th. So there's sites set up for the purpose of basically starting a stopwatch when it gets down to 45 degrees and stopping it when it gets back up above 45. And they just count how many hours, so you can get up to 24 hours a day. Typically you'll get 10 hours a day in the evening. You just add up those hours. It's hard to do yourself. It's easy to look up. It varies year by year, of course. And there are those who think the number of chill hours we get is going down because of global warming. I believe in global warming. I'm not sure the number of hours is going to change by enough to care. So bottom line is a high number of hours is for a tree that wants to live in Minnesota. A low number of chill hours wants to live in Southern California. For us, a few hundred is a good number. Under 700 is what you're looking for. Okay, hope that.
Yeah, I'm sure that answers Amy's question. We've got a couple other questions here about when is a good time to plant? And I was just going to add in here, I wasn't sure if you were going to cover it. Right now, the bare root trees are coming into the nurseries.
Right, I think it's covered in planting, but yes, right now is a good time. Wait till after frost for your citrus trees. Citrus trees are best planted like probably in mid-March. Alternatively, you could do it in like September, late September when it starts to cool down. Your citrus trees want to get established before the summer heat. They want to get established before the winter cold. So you're basically avoiding midsummer and midwinter. Okay, but I think we'll get to that with planting. Let me keep going here.
Yeah.
I happen to be particularly fond of having fruit all the time. So I love this fruit ripening chart. You can Google fruit ripening chart. You'll find this thing. And it has, down the left is all kinds of fruit. Across the top is a calendar. And for instance, you can see right here, pears start getting ripe July 15th. The Harrow Delight will get ripe July 15th to the end of July. This is in the Central Valley, so some of these get adjusted to the right, but you can, for instance, in your fruit cocktail tree, you can pick cherries that ripen early, or peaches, these are peaches, early, peaches that ripen in the middle of the summer, peaches that ripen late in the summer, peaches that ripen in October. You can pick, when you want your tree to ripen. This is a just delightfully fun thing probably not critical for choosing your tree, but I really like having the choice of when it's going to get ripe. Pretty important to see if it needs a pollinator. If you plant a Bing cherry and there's no other cherry trees around, you're not going to get any Bing cherries because Bings won't pollinate themselves. You'll need a black Tartarian or something else, Stella, to pollinate your Bing. Now this sounds complicated, but it turns out it's real simple. It will say this Fuji apple is self-fruitful. Look at the label. The Bing cherry, it says pollinized by black tart, Van Rainier lapins, pollinized by the Dapple Dandy Pluot is pollinized by a Flavor Supreme Pluot or a Flavor King Pluot. Okay, so you can just read the label, but it's important to do that and find out, does it need a pollinator, and make sure you get one of those that matches it. Pick the size you want. True dwarf trees, which I don't have any pictures of, actually you can tell in the nursery it's a true dwarf because it looks gnarly and small. A regular semi-dwarf tree, it'll be a stick with some branches on it. It's hard to tell a semi-dwarf from a full-size tree. They kind of look the same, but that dwarf tree is going to be 3 feet tall and have a lot of branches. It's going to be like a ball. It looks different. It will grow much shorter. It'll have fruit sooner. But they say the fruit isn't necessarily quite as good. We're growing them as well as the semi-dwarf trees in Martial Cottle Park, and we're going to find out. We're going to compare them. However, the other thing to know is dwarf trees won't get big, but large trees you can control with pruning. Come to the pruning class. There is one coming up in about 2 weeks. I will give you details later. But with proper pruning, you can keep your tree 6 feet tall or 6 feet wide, or let it grow to 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. Most of what you'll find in the nursery is on a semi-dwarf rootstock. That's most of what we've planted in Martial Cottle Park is things that are on a semi-dwarf rootstock. Check for disease resistance. That won't necessarily show up as much on the labels, but it's worth looking at. If you're comparing 2 trees side by side in the nursery and they're otherwise equal, find the peach that says resistant to peach leaf curl. Find the pear that says resistant to fire blight. You know, each tree has a certain thing that it's particularly prone to, and if you have a choice between 2 and one says resistant to something, take the resistant one. Look for a nice thick trunk. Basically, all of the stuff from the ground, all the water and all the nutrients from the ground are going to come up through that trunk. The bigger it is, the more stuff you can pass up. And similarly, everything is growing in the leaves that feeds those roots is going to go back down it. So a thick trunk is a good starting point for a good tree. Multi-grafted is cool. I wasn't watching closely, but I think I saw, do you need what do I think about multi-grafted fruit cocktail trees? I think they're very cool. We don't have any yet, but that will change in about a month. I will be grafting several things onto some things in what we call graft land at Martial Cottle Park. The one thing to know about them is plan to give each variety its own space, right? Each branch, even if they're the same variety, but much more if you have a peach and a plum on the same tree, the peach is probably going to outgrow the plum. And it's going to overshadow it. It's going to suck up all the resources. You will have to prune each tree in its own space. I literally draw a line. Basically, I typically put 4 on, and I'll draw a line in my mind. This space belongs to this one, this to that one, and there'll be a gap in between. And none of them get to invade the other one's space. So if you do a multi-grafted tree, plan to prune it to keep it limited. Okay. So here's, like I said, here's the labels. You can find things like it's self-fruitful, it's 700 hours, it's pollinized by. Over here you see August harvest. So this Dapple Dandy Pluot is August in Central California. So these all come from a grower that they aim at Central California, and we just tend to be sometimes a few days to a week later than Central California because they're warmer. So the label is real useful. If it doesn't have this kind of information, if it just says peach tree, go find another nursery, or at least find another tree. Okay.
Don, we did have one question about, or a couple of questions about avocados.
Okay.
So are avocados self-fruitful or do they need a pollinizer?
Um,
Do you happen to know?
I know the answers. Yes and no. I've had several conversations with the experts on this. So avocados are a really strange tree. Each tree is both male and female, but the flowers don't bloom at the same time. So ideally you want a type A avocado and a type B avocado, because the type A will pollinate while the type B is fertile, and the type B will pollinate while the type A is fertile. So it's best to get an A and a B, and again, the label should say type A or type B. On the other hand, the experts tell me it isn't that important here because our climate is sort of not quite what avocados were bred to. So you'll get avocados with just one tree. We initially had just type A trees at Martial Cottle Park, 2 of them, and I basically insisted on planting a type B as well because I wanted my best chance of getting the most fruit. Okay.
So Amy is asking specifically about bacon avocados. How would you recommend she find that out?
You can Google what type is a bacon avocado, or you can ask and I'll tell you it's a B. It's type B. It's very convenient because I planted one, B, I planted one, and B for bacon, it turns out.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean any other, that doesn't mean A for avocado, they're all A's or anything like that. Just happens to be bacon is a B. All right, I'm gonna keep moving. So we're gonna plant the tree. We picked it, we know where we're gonna put it. Yeah, I did talk about when it's prime time. So your palm and stone bare root trees. So your apple trees, pears, peaches, plums, everything except citrus. You're going to plant it as a stick. So the top picture here is a citrus. It's got leaves. The bottom one is a palm or a stone fruit. It doesn't have leaves. Then you go to the nursery right now, they won't have leaves. And in fact, the roots might be just sitting in a pile of sawdust. That's great. That's exactly what you need. These days, they often are in a pot, which is basically a pot full of sawdust. But right now is the time. Through February is all a good time to plant. First thing you do when you're ready, when you actually get out there to where it's going to be, we're not going to start by digging a hole, but we're going to bring our shovel, we're going to bring everything out there. The first thing you do is shake the sawdust out of that tree, pull it out of the pot, shake all the sawdust off, and soak the roots. We're going to wake that tree up, okay? An hour or so will be fine. This isn't an overnight soak, but probably if you do this, start this first thing, and then we dig our hole and get everything ready, it'll be about right. Citrus is never bare root. For a citrus tree, we're never going to pull it out of the pot and shake out the roots. It's in real soil, and you're going to keep that soil around it. So it's going to be potted. You want to plant that in March, after the frost, but before the summer heat. And get it in there, you know, mid-March, and you just be astonished how fast it starts growing. In April, it'll be, you know, all kinds of little stuff's coming out on it. We're going to dig a hole as deep as the roots and twice as wide. Okay, so what we're really trying to do is loosen up the soil. The roots are going to spread out into the soil. We want to loosen it up. Right, so this picture I've drawn, you can see how much soil this, or how deep the root ball is on the citrus. I dug a hole that deep, but notice the root ball is not sitting on the bottom of the hole. Okay, because we're loosening it up all around. So the next things we're going to do is we're going to put 6 inches of dirt back into the hole to be underneath the root ball or underneath the roots. Okay, so we're loosening up all around it. We're going to put some dirt back. We are not going to put compost in. We're not going to put fertilizer in. We're not going to put sawdust in. We're not going to put anything in there. And this is something else that was repeated over and over in my training, which just amazed me because I always would go out and dig a great big hole and put all kinds of stuff in there because this tree was just going to do great. And it turns out that's sort of a bad idea, mostly because this big hole you dug with all this loose, wonderful compost, the tree is going to grow into that. And then when it finds the edge of that, the roots are going to stop growing. They're just going to try to stay in there. And it can actually get trapped. The roots can actually get trapped in that wonderful soft soil and never get out into the native soil, which is where they actually need to get to all the water and fertilizer they need. So this is really important. Don't whip it up. Don't put all that stuff in. It's going to go, the dirt you dig out is the dirt you're going to put back. Remarkable, surprising. I know you don't believe me. This is what the research tells us. We're going to put 6 inches of dirt back in the hole. The tree's going to sit on top of it. And that's going to help with drainage and settling, because you notice this tree is actually up on a mound. And when you get all done, if this is the soil down here, it's mounded up to where the tree is. That'll help the water drain away from the tree. And especially when all the dirt around here sort of settles and the tree settles down, if you plant it level, it's going to end up in a hole, and you're going to have water sitting right against the trunk of your tree, which is really not a good thing. Okay, so like 6 inches tall, we're talking about a 6-inch mound that your tree is sitting on. Okay, same with the bare root tree. In fact, you'll find that roots are only about 6 inches deep on a bare root tree when you get it from the nursery. So you're going to dig a 6-inch deep hole, which is really not very deep. Then you can put all the dirt back in, and you're going to sit that tree right on top of the ground and pile up dirt around it. It's kind of amazing. When we did it at Martial Cottle, we found sometimes the tree was literally sitting right on ground level, and then we'd pile up the dirt up to where it needed to be above the roots. Okay, so as you're doing this and that seems wrong and it looks wrong, just remember, I said, yes, do that. Just popping my head up here, gopher net around the roots. Yes, you can do that. Better to trap the gophers, but I lost a mulberry tree to gophers a few years ago at home here, and I since put I put hardware cloth around the bottom. But yeah, you can keep gophers out with a hardware cloth net.
Don, we had a couple other planting questions real quick. Deborah is asking, she just planted a 1/2-gallon lime. The tree's so small and the graft line's tiny. So she planted it high. Do you think it'll be okay?
Okay, so it's a 1/2-gallon pot, so it's a very small tree. It's planted in a mound, or it's up above the ground level, and it's in the grass. Yeah, I think it'll be okay. If you move the grass back, that'll help. I would cover it until March for frost, because that's a really small, really tender little tree. And if the rain scheduled for next week comes, it'll probably be followed by cold. So between now and March, it's likely that some frost will affect it. With a full-size citrus tree, it can handle frost and lose 6 inches of its outsides to the frost and come back. If your tree is only 6 inches tall, the frost will take the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peter is asking, what about planting on a slope?
That's good for the cold air to slip by. If it's north facing, that's a little bit of a problem because anything above it is going to shade it. If it's south facing, that's pretty good. As far as the mechanics of the hole and so on, I don't have any great advice. Figure out, you're basically going to have to figure out how deep to go to get it, so it's not sticking out on the downhill side, so it's not buried on the uphill side. But as long as it's not a really steep slope, that should be fine.
And then finally, Terry is asking, she's got soil that's kind of on sandstone. They're on a ridge top. Any suggestions in her case? What kind of dirt would she put back into the hole?
Can we unmute her? Hear a little bit about her soil?
Yeah.
Because it turns out this is going to be relevant to watering as well.
So Terry, I'm going to find you.
So basically the answer is going to be use the dirt that you've got, unless you're going to actually bring in several yards of dirt that you actually think is going to be where the tree is going to live.
Terry, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Don.
Hi.
Tell me a little bit more about your hilltop.
Well, it's a ridge top in southern Santa Clara County, and mostly what's been growing here before have been pine trees. So there's about 3 inches of duff, and then below that is mostly sandstone.
Is there any dirt?
No, not much.
Huh. I'll tell you, I don't know.
The trees we have planted are not growing very fast, and About 50% of them have died. I think we'll discontinue that rootstock and try the rootstock that did continue. I'm sorry, I don't remember the names.
I mean, if you're literally sitting on sandstone under 3 inches of duff, that's gonna be really hard to grow something in. I would try to find a way to put some soil up there. I mean, literally
Yeah,
a couple of feet of soil, maybe find a level spot that'll stay instead of, just going off in the first rain. But you got to have some dirt to hold the water, to hold the tree.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've got, yeah, that sounds like it fits.
Okay, so let me keep going here. Is that okay, Sharon?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you notice I didn't actually finally plant the tree. Let's keep going. Now that we've got the hole, put 6 inches of dirt back in it, we're gonna put the tree in there. We wanna put the graft scar facing north away from the sun. So this is the graft scar. This tree's got a rootstock going straight up. They put a bud on it, which grew out. So the tree is growing up to the right there. And on the left, right where that arrow is basically, you can see that it was cut off. The rootstock is cut off to force the bud to grow. This is standard, normal. All your trees are likely to have this. That is a sensitive spot that we just don't want the sun to burn. If you forget, it's not fatal, but it's good practice is put that thing to the north. If you don't know which way north is, it's away from the sun. Right? You can see the shadow down here on the ground from the tree. Just put that thing in the shadow. You'll be all set. Then we're going to fill in the hole with native soil, tamping it down as we go. So put in some soil, tamp it down. We basically want to get most of the air bubbles squeezed out. You don't want to squish it really hard, but just push it down. Don't bury the graft scar. If you bury it up to the graft, you have way too much soil. That thing should be 4 to 6 inches above the ground. Water it thoroughly as you fill it. I actually was saw a talk just 2 weeks ago from an expert who said, mud it up. Go ahead and fill it with water, shake your tree a little bit to settle it well. When you're all done, your tree should be about 6 inches above the original ground line. That is, the ground line on your tree should be about 6 inches up, right? So you're gonna gather some dirt from someplace else and bring it over and mound it up. If it sank too much, so you're not actually on a mound anymore, you can gently, and this is for a palm, or this is not your citrus tree, but your bare root trees, you can gently lift it in that mud and just sort of shake it and lift it and shake it and lift it to get it up to where it needs to be, right? Because those roots, you'll recognize those roots are short and thick, and they can handle that. Okay, so you got the tree in, it's on a mound, you're all set. Want to mulch all around the tree. So we use wood chips that we get from the people who chop your trees down all around Martial Cottle Park. Put it 3 feet out around the tree, but don't actually put it right next to the tree. So we try to keep the wood chips away from right next to the tree. You'll see that better in a later thing. But wood chips right next to the tree can help fungus grow into the tree. So we keep the tree right next to the tree clear, but go 3 feet wide with your wood chips. That is great for saving water. It's great for keeping the weeds out, and it's great for feeding the soil itself. The soil will get better over the next couple of years as those wood chips degrade. Mulch is magic stuff. The next thing, this is amazing. Palm and stone trees, not your citrus, but the palm and everything else, cut it off knee high. Now this is part of I grow my trees only 8 feet tall. So they got to start spreading their branches out real low. So 18 to 24 inches, literally knee high, you're going to chop it off. And when we do this talk, we tell people this, master gardeners, people from the community, they all write it down. I say, this is important. You're going to actually do this. And they write it down diligently. And we go out and we plant the tree and it's all set. And we put the bark out and it's standing there and I lop it off. I get my loppers and I cut it off 18 inches tall, and everyone gasps. They can't believe I actually meant cut it off. You'll see pictures later on. We really do that. And then we painted the trunk white, latex paint, half water, half paint, just any old water-based paint at the store. Dilute it, half water, half paint, and just slather it on. You'll see that in a minute too. It prevents sunburn and it reduces insect damage, right? You're going to get sunburn because this stick has nothing protecting it from the sun. So we've got the graft scars facing north. Your citrus tree keeps its leaves. There's nothing on top of the root ball. I didn't mention that. On a citrus tree, you've got dirt that comes with the tree. Don't put any more dirt on top of it. That's exactly how deep the tree should be. And then mound up to that. Hole is twice as deep and twice as wide, so you get loose soil all around it. Your bare root tree is going to be similar, except we're going to cut it off knee high. All right. Now, it looks like I need to keep moving if I'm going to get anywhere close to 8 o'clock here. Water. This is important, right? 2 different top 5 things on this one page. There are lots of things you need to know to figure out how to water a tree right and so on. I studied this carefully, figuring out how we're going to do it at Martial Cottle, and came up with what I was astonished how simple this was. I don't know why they don't teach it this way. You need to measure the area inside the drip line. So the drip line is, imagine the water is dripping off the trees. Where is the outer ring of where it's going to drip? This is a very common term for trees. So that ring is the drip line. You want to measure the area inside that drip line. Okay, roughly, this is real roughly, that's the width times itself. So if this tree is 6 feet all the way across, the area is roughly 36 feet. Now, many of you know that's not quite right. The correct answer is 27 feet. So it's really 3/4 of that. But for our purposes, if you want the simple version, measure how wide it is, multiply that by itself, that's the area. Okay. The next thing you got to know is you're going to give the tree 1 gallon of water per square foot in that area per week. Okay, that's the magic number. That's the key thing you got to know. 1 gallon per square foot per week is how much you need. I didn't say you have to do it weekly. I didn't say it has to be inside that drip line or all around that drip line. Just this tree is going to need 1 gallon per square foot per week. Half that in the spring, so you don't need quite as much in the spring because there's a lot of water already in the soil and it's not as hot. So you'll start sometime in April, several weeks after the rain stops, and you're going to stop in fall when the rain starts. Although be careful, we turned off the water at Martial Cottle Park with the first rain in November, and it hasn't rained since. I may have killed my bacon avocado because it dried out. I'm working on that. At Martial Cottle Park, we just decided as a nice round figure, 9 gallons a week for a brand new tree. If you do the math, that's like, it's a little over 2 feet across, maybe 3, consider it 3 feet across, you get 9 gallons a week. In the second year, they're quite a bit larger, so we're going with 27 gallons a week. This is actually a 6 feet across tree, gets 27 gallons a week. And at this point, it might be a good thing to mention, Sharon, go ahead and post the slides for anybody who wasn't here when we started, because these slides are available. You need to pull them down from the chat. They're not going to be posted anywhere apparently, but if you pull them down from the chat, you'll have them available. You'll have things like this formula. How often to water is a separate question. You might want a ½ gallon twice a week. You might 1 gallon once a week. You might want 2 gallons every 2 weeks. There are lots of reasons to choose different answers. What I figured out was it's more complicated than it needs to be. We chose every 3 days. If you have a sandy soil and you go with every 2 weeks, your trees are going to die because your soil can't hold 2 weeks of water. If you have a clay soil, it'll hold water that will last a long time. You can actually pump in enough water and it'll hold on to it to last 2 weeks. But figuring out what kind of soil you have and so on, you don't need to. Just water every 3 days is what we chose. Up to a week, to once a week might work, but we went with every 3 days, which means you do a little math. That 27 gallons a week for a 2-year-old tree means, divide that by 7, you get about 4 gallons a day. I'm going to water every 3 days. So I'm going to set up my watering to do 12 gallons every 3 days for that 2-year-old tree. Okay, 12 gallons every 3 days. Next, I need to know how much water I'm delivering. So we use drip. There's lots of other choices. You can have sprinklers. You can water it by hand. If you water it by hand, just So you know, 1.5 inches of water is a gallon per square foot. It's a very useful little thing to know. 1.5 inches of water is a gallon per square foot. So if you can actually put 1.5 inches of water in a ring this big once a week and do it every week, that will work very nicely. I don't trust myself. So I have my drip system puts out 0.4 gallons per hour in a dripper. It just happens to be the kind we picked. I chose 18 feet because it seemed to match the size of the tree well. It turns out 100 minutes of 18 feet at 0.4 gallons per foot, it comes to 12 gallons of water. Or you got a 2-year-old tree that's 6 feet across, give it 12 gallons of water a week by doing this. I spiral it in from the drip line. That is, my drip hose is just wrapped around the tree like so. It doesn't really matter where you put the water. It doesn't have to be all the way around. It doesn't have to be, it certainly doesn't have to cover that whole area. The tree will find the water. I've seen things that suggest as little as 25% of that space needs to be covered, and you'll be just fine. So there's a balance between how much you spend on hose and how long the water runs. But basically, you just need to do the math and figure out how much you want to give and how much you're getting and how, so, so therefore, how long it's going to run. Put it on a timer so you don't forget, and so the tree never runs dry. This is on my top 5 list. Put it on a timer so when you go on vacation, the tree's still getting watered. It's hard to make that more complicated. Okay, so I will skip this one because of the time we have. This is more, yeah.
Don, can I just ask if you're going to skip that one? A couple of things. So people are telling me the PDF is not in the chat. Just let me tell you, I've posted it a few times now, so I'm not understanding. It's labeled a good start.pdf, and it should be there in the chat, and you should be able to click on it. It's going to ask you if you want to download it.
Like it says, you need to scroll. You'll have to scroll up because the word, oh, got it. Okay.
Okay, so there's some people saw it. Okay, the other question real quick, winter, and maybe I'll just winter watering. Let me just make this comment. In my area, we've gotten 1.5 inches of rain this year to date.
Yes.
We should be at 7.5.
Yes.
So I'm trying to make up for that with my watering schedule.
Yep. Like I said, we took the timers off at Martial Cottle Park. We actually put them inside. We take them off and put them inside so they don't split with the frost. We did that with the first rain in the middle of November, and it didn't rain again. And like I said, I think I might have lost my bacon avocado, which was we had just planted it 3 months or 2 months earlier. So yeah, normally the winter rain takes care of it, but if it's not raining, you need to water your avocados and your citrus. Probably not the palm fruits. I mean, they're bare root. They don't need the water. Okay, what I will say about this slide is same story. The math is more accurate. So many of you will recognize and value having a formula and be able to work it out. The area can be calculated correctly. You can decide less water or more water, and nice little formula here I worked out because you get to choose how fast your drips go, how many drippers you're going to have, how long you're going to run, and you know how big your tree is. You get lots of, I mean, you could have a lot of hose and a short run time, a little hose, a long run time, and it's really your choice. Just as a bulk, well, these numbers are actually what we used in Martial Cottle Park. So you get an idea of what a reasonable answer looks like. And I will move on then from there. So now it's getting watered. What do we do to help it prosper? This is a 1-year-old apricot tree, by the way. Just amazing. First year, the whole idea is to let the tree grow. We're not going to prune it. We're not going to shape it. I mean, you might pull the branches a little wide if you like to try to give it some shape, but basically we want vigor. We're trying to grow strong roots, a thick trunk, a strong tree. So just let it rip. We're going to mulch to reduce weeds, save water, feed the soil. So you'll see there's wood chips all around this tree. We're going to water it steadily all summer and fall. That first week we gave it 9 gallons a week, or first year we gave it 9 gallons a week. And we feed it. And this gets complicated, and I really don't know how to make it simple. So here's my best shot. For palms and stones, you're going to want 1 ounce of actual nitrogen, which I will explain, per year of age in April and in June. Okay, so twice we're going to give it some nitrogen fertilizer. Citrus is going to get the same thing in February and in May. So citrus is going to get started a little sooner because it's green at the beginning, and it's going to take off faster. At year 4, go look up the fertilizer schedule in the California backyard orchard, because different trees want different amounts and different schedules. But for the first few years, it pretty much comes down to 1 ounce of nitrogen per every year of age. Okay. Now, what do I mean by 1 ounce of nitrogen? 1 ounce of nitrogen is 1 cup of blood meal. It's 2.5 cups of 5-2-2 fertilizer. And more generally, when you look at your fertilizer, you'll see NPK, you'll see 3 numbers like 5-2-2 on the label. If it's fertilizer, it has to have these numbers in this order. That first one is the only one that matters. This is a little weird, but in California, you don't really need the P and the K. The soil has enough. You really only need the nitrogen. So that number is on the package. Take 100 divided by that number. I'm sorry, that's the math. That's how much fertilizer you need to get 1 ounce of nitrogen. So if that number is a 5, it means 5% of that fertilizer is nitrogen. So we take 100 over 5 means we need 20 ounces of that fertilizer, or 2.5 cups of that fertilizer. There isn't an easier way to say this, except if you decide to go to the hardware store or the nursery and pick up the package that says fruit tree fertilizer or citrus and avocado fertilizer and read the package and do what it says, that's not bad. Do fertilize your fruit trees. Don't get obsessed about exact amounts, okay? This is the official answer is you need a certain amount of nitrogen. The unofficial answer is buy the fertilizer at the store and follow the directions, okay? And remove weeds. So we're gonna let it grow, water it, feed it, remove the weeds, and off we go. That's our first year. All right, so in the first year, planting day looks like this. We only kept that 1 stump, right? So I actually have hidden out part of this picture because I didn't have a picture of this tree, but this is that Alberta tree, peach I promised to show you. This is planting day. It was a stick 1.5 feet tall. By the end of that year, it was about 6 feet across and 5 feet tall, 7 feet across, 5 feet tall. That's the end of 1 year. And then at the end of the year, it's went dormant, of course. Lovely tree. Second year, similar. We're still going for vigor. We're not trying to grow fruit yet. So strong roots, thick trunk, little bit of fruit the next year, okay? We're gonna mulch, save the water, and so we're gonna water steadily, about 3 times as much water as the first year. Now do the math. The tree's gonna get to about 6 feet across, so it's gonna need about 27 gallons of water and so on. But if you just wanna keep it simple, triple last year. You're not gonna triple it every year, but that's the second year we do this. Give it 2 ounces of nitrogen, right? 1 ounce for every year of its age. All the stuff we talked about previously, just go look at that up and double it and take out the weeds. And basically the same thing as we did before, let it grow. So in the second year, I will talk in a minute about pruning, but we pruned it back to here, that lovely tree you saw. And then by May, it had grown out like this, and September, 3-4 months ago, it was more like 8 feet tall. It's as tall as it's allowed to get, and about 10 feet wide. This is just a gorgeous tree. All right, so I'm gonna keep right on going here. I promise to just answer questions nonstop as soon as we cover the material here. So I'm gonna move to pruning, unless Sharon, there's something we should do now.
No, I just let everybody know in the chat, there's some people who still didn't get the PDF. So I will email all participants tomorrow when I can pull your email addresses off and send it to you.
Oh boy, you should appreciate that, folks, because that's a lot of work on her part. She can only send 7 at a time, but it's okay. She'll do it. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about pruning. This is a whole session of its own every year. This is a huge topic. There are many ways to do it. In fact, there is a pruning class in, I think it's about 2.5 weeks, and I will have a pointer to it at the end of this deck that'll be easy for you to follow up on. What I'm going to tell you, teach you how to do is how we're doing most of the trees at Martial Cottle Park, which is short and wide, sort of like a champagne, the wrong kind of champagne. No, margarita, a margarita glass. That's what it is. Short stem, wide bowl. You really want to think in terms of pruning about what are you pruning for. My wife likes lollipop-shaped trees with lots of flowers on them, all the same color. So she doesn't like my grafted trees because they bloom at different times. She doesn't like my bowl-shaped trees because they don't look like lollipops. So I keep these trees in the way back, and the pretty trees we keep up front. So I want trees I can manage without a ladder. That's why I keep them 8 feet tall. That's a top 5 thing growing short trees. I want to use all the sunlight. So I've planted the trees 12 feet apart, and I actually expect them to grow almost to touch each other. There are paths through the orchard, but between the trees, they may touch each other when they're at their peak. Citrus trees, this is important to keep in mind. Everything I'm going to tell you about pruning does not apply to citrus trees. Citrus trees basically fill in themselves just fine. They grow in nice round balls. They're really thick. And all the story about getting sunlight in the middle of the tree for your fruit doesn't really apply to citrus. Citrus grows its fruit basically around the outside of the tree. It does just fine with pretty much no pruning until they fill their space. If it's too tall to reach, go ahead and shorten it. If it's got gangly branches you don't like, cut them off. Lemon trees tend to shoot straight up. Have at them. You know, teach the tree who's boss. Go ahead and cut off the stuff you don't like. They actually grow in some citrus orchards. They literally drive straight down the row with a gigantic hedge trimmer and cut the trees vertically straight and cut across the top. They just use a hedge trimmer and shape them like that. I'm not recommending that, but my point is you don't have to be clever. You don't have to be fussy about it. And if it fits in your yard, you don't have to trim them at all. So this is what I'm going through for with my palms and my stones. First, I promised a picture. Here's a picture on the far left of what a tree in our orchard looks like the day we plant it. Right? There's no sticks. I mean, it's just one stick cut off knee high and all painted, top to bottom, just slathered on. The paint's good for it. The next year, it's going to get 3 or 4 branches that are maybe a foot long. The year after that, it's going to get 3 or 4 branches on each of those, and it's going to be quite a bit wider. Okay, so let me show you what we did on that Alberta peach. At the end of its first year in February of 2020, this was that beautiful 5 feet tall, 7 foot wide, 1-year-old tree. We cut it down to 4 branches, right? One with its own little side branch here, one toward the back, another toward the back, and another one coming forward with its own little side branch. And we'll see these branches later as this tree matures, but basically that's about a foot to a foot and a half, and that's it. I learned in the pruning class last week, for 1-year-old for 1-year-old branches, which all these are 1-year-old because we cut it back to here to start, the shorter you cut it, the more it grows. We're trying to grow this tree out vigorously. So we're going to cut it way back so it grows like crazy in year 2. So that's what we did. We had just this left. My friend who's doing the pruning class in 2 weeks talks about pruner's disease, new pruner's disease. New pruners never cut enough. Interesting. So that was what we left it at March 2020. By September 2020, it was 8 feet high and 10 feet wide. Beautiful tree. January this year, that's what the same tree looked like with all of its leaves gone. Lots of lovely stuff, but we're not ready yet to let it go because we want to basically aim it. One more year, I want to control it and get it wide and not so high. So brace yourself. There's the tree on the left. And yesterday I did this for this class, I trimmed it. So remember, oh, I'll go to the next one, same things. So here's the first year on the left, second year, or end of the first year, start of the second year. And here's what we've done just this week, just yesterday. Notice if you look, Ken, the branch on the right goes up and then out. That's the same branch here, goes up and then out. And on that, we've kept the 4 biggest branches, actually 3 going out, and there's one on the side that just seemed right. The branch in the back, I kept one on. The branch back here, I kept one on. This branch to the left and out, right? Left and out is right here and to there. We kept 3 branches on it. And basically I've got 9 branches now, nice and strong, nice and wide, completely open in the middle for sunshine. That's going to be a great foundation for that tree for the next, for the rest of its life. I also got a little greedy. I'm going to try to have just a little bit of fruit on this tree. So you can just barely see a twig here. There's a twig down here. There's about 6 or 8 twigs on this tree that I'm hoping they'll have fruit, and we'll have a few fruit on here just to sort of start sampling these things. Basically, for the first 3 years, the research says don't grow any fruit, just grow the tree, but I can't wait. Okay, so that's how we've pruned it. Yeah, we're a little over time, but we're doing okay. Pests, diseases, problems, I'm not going to tell you much about. I'm sorry, I promised it and didn't give it to you. It's all in the California backyard orchard. It depends on what your pest is and what your tree is and what the time of the year is. There's lots of different things that come up. So go to the California backyard orchard, find that thing says pests and diseases, click on it, and you can follow the path down for, if you know what the bug is, you can look up the bug. If you know what your kind of tree is, you look at your tree. You can look it up by symptoms. This is a great resource for all kinds of problems. Call the Master Gardener's Help Desk. Make sure you're calling your county. I'm assuming Santa Clara County, but wherever your county is, even out of state, Master Gardeners are nationwide. They're county-based. So find your county help desk. They'll know about the pests in your area. And for a really in-depth, go to the UC Integrated Pest Management, IPM. IPM is Integrated Pest Management, which talks about using the least toxic thing that will be effective. Only working problems that are real. If something's going on that doesn't really matter, you just leave it alone. But that's this site. This is the research basically directly from the UC. What we've had at Martial Cottle Park, we had peach leaf curl last year. And as far as I can tell, everybody did, all over the valley. It was a hot topic in the help desk. For peach leaf curl, try to choose resistant varieties if that's a problem. The standard treatment is copper spray, follow the label directions. Simple rule of thumb is Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Valentine's Day is a good time to apply your copper spray for peach leaf curl. We've had ground squirrels eating the bark off our trees. I mean, I didn't expect that. There it was. So removing the weeds helps because that's what they're eating. They eat the grass until it turns into seeds, and then they eat the grass seeds, and then they eat your bark. So if you can keep the place clear, if you don't have squirrels, that's going to be better. You can also put plastic barriers or wire cloth or things around the trunk, wrap them, or you can trap the gopher or trap the squirrels necessary to then eliminate them in a humane manner. Don't carry them off to your neighbors. Not only is that not good to your neighbors, it's literally illegal to trap squirrels and take them someplace else. So don't do that. We had leaf borers in the citrus trees, which again seem to have been all over the valley. People were asking about it. I have them on my trees at home. There's not much you can do about leaf borers in citrus trees. They're inside the leaves. You can't spray them because the leaf protects them. You can't put systemic stuff into the tree because it'll get into your fruit. And it turns out it's not that big a deal. It doesn't look good, but it isn't hurting the tree that much, so we did nothing. And we trap gophers, so we have not had a problem with them. Here at home, I do the same thing, but I did still lose a tree to a gopher. And over in that spot in my yard, I've put, like I say, hardware cloth around the new tree I planted there. And I think I've now got to everything I'm going to cover. Look it up in the backyard orchard. 6 to 8 hours of sun, or don't even bother. Calculate how much water you need, put it on a timer, and keep your trees short. All right. And finally, there's a bunch of resources here, all of which I've talked about. The California Backyard Orchard, Master Gardeners, IPM. Notice the Master Gardener one here, we've got classes and events. This is actually what's on there. You are at getting fruit trees off to a good start. And in 2 weeks, on the 6th of February, winter fruit tree pruning. So all your pruning questions, go ask Alan on the 6th. I will be his co-pilot on that one. I'll be in Sharon's seat, so we'll see you there. Okay, and some lovely pictures of our citrus trees. The grapefruit I'm holding right now is one of those you see in that picture because they're ripe now, so we're eating them. So I'll leave the resources up in case you couldn't get the slides or just want to write these down while we answer questions.
Yes, we've got a few. So Alexandra, I think it is asking if you cut it off to knee height, that'll cut off the grafts on a fruit salad tree. Recommendations.
Oh, very good point. Don't do that. Yeah, if you know where the grafts are on the fruit salad tree, make sure you don't take them off. I would trim those back though to. It's hard to. Basically, the farther you can trim it back, the more vigorously it will grow. So if you have a fruit salad tree with say 4 different fruits on it, and each one has several branches for that variety, I would almost go back to just the main branch for each variety, maybe just 3 or 4 buds on each variety. Clearly you don't want to cut it off because that's what you bought it for, but if you get it nice and short, if you get them all matching nice and short, they're going to all grow out fast. Remember what we did? It's like after the first year. If you can make it look something like this tree, the March 2020 tree, where it's got just 4 strong branches, and I would think even shorter for your fruit salad, just knowing how big they are at the store. If you can just get, each one has its own separate branch and they're, primed to go, that will cause it to grow the fastest. Don't cut them off though all the way. That would be very sad.
June is asking, she has a 1-year-old peach tree, planted it a year ago. Mm-hmm. Can she prune it now? And how far back would you prune it if she hasn't taken it back?
Yeah. So 1-year-old, if you really like the idea of a tree that's 8 feet wide or 8 feet tall and 12 feet wide, if you really want this margarita glass shape that I'm suggesting, I would go ahead and cut it off. I mean, I assume you planted it and did not cut it off, and it's now 4 feet tall, and the first 3 feet is just the stick. It will be difficult, and I don't blame you if you won't, but I would cut it off knee high this year. Now is a fine time, anytime between now and February, and then proceed down this path of making it wide. If you're not comfortable with that, just trim it back. The farther you trim it, the faster it'll grow. So come next week, or come in 2 weeks to Alan's class, and he'll be specifically talking about pruning, and specifically which branches are the growing branches, which branches are the fruit branches, how to guide the tree so it either grows fast. You can also, the flip side is, if you don't trim it way back, it doesn't actually grow out as fast. So when you're done, when your tree is as big as you want, you don't cut it way back because it'll grow like crazy again. You trim it a different way to cause the fruit to come out and the growth to grow less. So come to the class. It's really, really useful to know how you want to prune your tree, especially beyond 2 years, which is as far as I've talked about.
Yeah, and Don, we've gotten a couple of questions about true dwarf trees and how you treat them. Would that be covered in the class?
You can ask. I've asked Alan, and basically I have not found anyone who actually has an answer to that. So the way it works, if you actually can look at a true dwarf next to a regular tree at the nursery, you'll readily see it looks different. The growing part, the branches look different. And the reason is the leaves come out closer together. The way it's dwarfed is the space between leaves is less. So the branches just don't get as long because they got the same number of leaves, but the leaves are closer together on a shorter branch. It looks different. You don't really need to control it for size because it's not getting very big. You're not going to cut off a normal peach tree. You're going to cut off at least half of it in a normal year, every year, because they just grow like crazy and you want to get them back into size. A dwarf, you don't need to control the size that way. You might want to thin out the middle to make sure sunshine gets in the middle, but then the tree is only 3 feet around or 4 feet around. So maybe the sunshine is, it might be right to treat it like a citrus tree. It might literally be right to just leave it alone. That doesn't look wrong. And we haven't figured it out at Martial Cottle Park. And I've asked several people that ought to know, and they go, huh, that's an interesting question. So sorry, that's the best I got. Come on out to Martial Cottle Park from year to year and see what we're doing and see what works. We'll be just struggling ourselves to find out.
Don, Sandra and Nicole are asking about whether when you put the latex paint on the trunk of the tree, do you also paint the top of the cut, or do you let it callus over?
I would paint the top. It'll callus over anyway. Basically, the tree doesn't care about that paint. I mean, it doesn't slow it down. It doesn't inhibit it. It'll grow right over the callus in the same way it would have otherwise. Just the whole thing, top to bottom.
And would you like to say anything? Millie was asking about a dwarf bare root tree in pots. Do you want to say anything about growing in containers?
Lots of people do it. It works well. It's a great approach. It clearly handles the problem if you don't have a yard and you want to grow stuff. I'm not particularly expert on it. The one thing I would make sure is water it even more regularly. That is, in our orchard, the trees are actually reaching all over the place for water. You talk about the drip line and think that the roots are inside the drip line. The roots are way past the drip line. I've been 20 feet away from the trees, clearing out walking paths, and there's roots from the trees 20 feet away from those trees, just in the first 2 years. So they're reaching all over the place to find the water. Wherever the water is, that's where the roots are going to go. In your pot, there's no place for those roots to go. There's no extra water they can tap deeper or out someplace else. So if you let it go dry, it's going to suffer more. Now, I don't mean soak it. You can also quickly kill a potted tree by soaking it. But I don't know the rules of thumb for how you know how much is too much or not enough. What do you think, Sharon? Ask the help desk? Google it?
Yeah, any of these types of questions, we strongly recommend you can go to our Master Gardener website. If you go to the section that talks about contact us or ask a gardening question, you can send your questions in by email. If you have pictures, we're seeing a lot of questions here about older trees. If you want to send those to the help desk with pictures of those trees, they may be able to help you. You know, Don, we've got a lot of questions about trees not growing. So several people have said, you know, they've got a tree this size, it's not growing much, it's not growing very well. Or another one is citrus trees that all of a sudden become, well, it's probably a separate question, become seedy. Are there recommendations you would make about watering or fertilizing for those types of issues?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the situation. To me, the obvious reasons it wouldn't grow would be lack of sunshine, although that would tend to make a spindly tree more than a not growing tree. Lack of water. I really think the thing that's making these trees do so well at Martial Cottle Park is regular water, the right amount of it. So if you're watering by hand, how do you know it's the right amount? And do you ever miss? Do you water every 3 days always? Do you actually remember to water every Sunday and every Wednesday? I really think forgetting to water is probably the main reason they stop growing. And do fertilize. That nitrogen is it's what gets that kick of growth going. Actually, if you got a tree that's growing like mad and never produces fruit, you might be putting too much fertilizer on. But if it's not growing, fertilizer will help. And then the final thing would be, if you don't prune it, it will find its size and stop growing. Right? Remember, if you cut it back, it will grow vigorously. So the converse is, if you're not cutting it back, especially like a peach or an apricot, if you're not cutting it back, it's not gonna be growing back out. So you might consider. I'm mentally thinking of some trees that I know of that are just not growing, and they're small and spindly and never did grow. Cutting them back, it might not do much good. They need water and fertilizer. But if it's sort of large and just not growing, you might consider a fairly severe pruning to get it jolted and growing.
On a slightly different subject, Amy was asking, if you water strategically, can you influence root growth?
Probably. But I assume that you want the roots to grow like not towards your house, or there's something you're trying to not grow toward. In the winter, the ground is wet all around, everywhere, and the roots are going to be spreading out everywhere and finding the water. So you can't keep them from going anywhere. On the other hand, in the summer, they're going to beef up around the water. So it's not, the roots aren't hunting for water. The tree just grows more roots wherever it found the water. So yeah, if you water in the summer, just on the north side of the tree, the roots will end up being much bigger on the north side of the tree.
Actually, Don, we have a question about what is a fruit salad tree?
It's a multi-graft tree. So you can go to the nursery and buy a tree that has plums, apricots, peaches, maybe pluots, maybe nectarines, some combination of those. Basically stone fruits, but different ones, all grafted onto the same tree. And if you think about it, if the grafter cleverly chose when they ripen, they can all ripen at the same time, and you can pick all those fruits off one tree and put it in a fruit salad, chop it up. So it's a multi-grafted tree. In fact, I have a list of fruit varieties I'm going to graft onto a tree at Martial Cottle Park this spring to try to get exactly that, 4 or 5 stone fruits on one tree that all that ripen at the same time. So we'll see how that works. So we have 12 sections in the orchard at Martial Cottle, and each they have different names, but one is called Graftland. So I'm going to graft a dozen different trees with, I don't know, 30 or 40 different varieties of fruit on those trees. I'm going to have a cherry that has the longest season I can get by having different cherries that ripen early or late. I'm going to have a fruit salad tree that's all of them at once, things like that.
So Margaret has a persimmon tree that's 6 years old or more and is very small. Is it too late to dramatically cut a tree like that?
Persimmons, not so much. So there's a number of trees I wasn't talking about. And it turns out persimmons and what else would there be? Mulberries, figs. If it isn't in the list I talked about, it might be different. And persimmons, they don't really want to be whacked back. Actually, when we plant the persimmons, we cut them off at 18 inches because we do want to grow them out like the the bowl shape. But after that, they don't need nearly as much trimming as most of the other trees. And I will also mention apple trees. Apples and pears don't grow as fast as the stone fruits, so they will tend to need less trimming. Come to the class in 2 weeks and see, what you need to do with pruning. There's a lot more to pruning than I was able to cover.
Yeah, and there's several more questions about older trees and also from people in other areas. So if you're in another area, we would recommend that you contact the extension service, the agricultural extension service in your area. I'm seeing somebody here hi Sandy, from Alaska.
Whew.
Oh my goodness, it must be cold up there. Okay, we
Yeah.
won't talk about the temperature here in Santa Clara Valley.
It's cold out there. I think it's 50 degrees. Jeez.
But we are master gardeners trained by the University of California Cooperative Extension. The Cooperative Extension is a nationwide system of universities that were established to assist farmers. And we are here to help bring that information to the general public for our home backyards and suburbs. But please do contact the Cooperative Extension. You can just Google Cooperative Extension Alaska or Cooperative Extension wherever you are. I did post in the chat the place where you can find extension offices in California. So there also are several questions about sourcing bare root fruit trees or fruit trees in general. Let me pop in because I was just thinking about this, and then Don, if you could add to it. So I look for a local nursery that has fruit trees in sawdust rather than wrapped in plastic. That's my personal bias. There are still some of those kinds of nurseries around in our area. So you just have to check out your local nursery. Don, you probably know more than me.
So I'm not allowed to endorse any particular source. A good nursery, a good old nursery is always a good choice. There are several wholesalers. Basically, most of the nurseries will have the same wholesalers. So I can't endorse any particular wholesale nursery, but read the labels and see what you find. Turns out when you go look up your fruit and nut harvest dates, you'll find you're at a location of one of the better wholesale nurseries as well. They've also provided many of the trees we have here. So go to a good nursery, read the labels, see what you find. I'm going to grab one question I just saw going by because I happen to know that avocados, you have one you grew in water. When do you plant it? After the frost. Same as avocados are very much like citrus. So plant it after the frost, like mid-March.
Yeah, and if I could add in here, the pruning class, the link is not up for the registration. I'll check on that tomorrow and see if we can get that link up. They must be working with the library on that.
So what do you mean? It doesn't work when you click it?
Yeah, it says TBD.
Oh, okay. I thought
So
I was good grabbing this.
You can get to the class, but you can't register yet.
Okay, all right.
And by the way, it's 40 degrees in Alaska. Oh gosh, that's actually not as cold as I figured.
Plus 40? Oh, Juno.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm sure we've missed a ton of other questions. There were several about older fruit trees.
Yeah. So okay, several thoughts on that. They don't live forever. Apparently, peaches and apricots are on the shorter side, like 30 or 40 years is a good old tree. Palms, my understanding is live longer, but basically if the tree is decaying, rotting, you got a couple branches you keep alive, but every year you have to take one big branch off and you're not sure how long it's going to last, rip it out, put in a new one. You'll get fruit in 3 or 4 years. If you have a big tree you want to shrink down to size, There is a program to do, there's a way to do that. You can, again, ask Alan in 2 weeks how that works. You basically, it takes 3 or 4 years to work it down. And when you're all done, you have a tree that's been whacked down, whether you could have had a new tree of the type you chose, producing the way you want, in the shape you want. So if it's going to be a long, difficult slog, pull it out and put a new one in. On the other hand, if it's a tree you like, trim it carefully, trim it enthusiastically, and it will grow back. You know, if it has the ability, it will grow back well due to pruning. Yeah.
And Don, I'm just putting into the chat a few other resources.
Oh, good.
You know, one on pruning overgrown deciduous fruit trees and another on just regular training and pruning. I know we did have a question about espalier. There are lots of ways to prune. You know, I think if you go to those resources, or again, the California Backyard Orchard is a great resource.
Yes.
Start there. I think we're pretty much at the end of our time, so we better wrap up. Again, for specific questions or additional information, please feel free to contact the Santa Clara County Master Gardener website. We're going to have information about Santa Clara County. For those of you from other areas, you may need to look elsewhere. I want to thank Don for his presentation and for his good humor in trying to answer all these questions. We had a full house tonight, so we've tried to keep up with the questions, and I apologize. It's going by, the chat goes by really fast.
Yeah, as I see it going by, I just got to say, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
We also want to thank the Palo Alto Library for co-sponsoring this event, and to all of you for attending and for your great questions, and for all the fruit that you're growing or gonna be growing. Let me just say good night. Thank you.
Let me one more shameless plug.
Yeah.
If we ever get past this virus, come on down to Martial Cottle Park and see how it's growing.
And tell us where it's located.
Okay, I'll just say, a little more than a year from now, we should reach, actually a year from now, we should reach a point where there's year-round fruit, any day of the year. Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, any day of the year, you can come pick fruit and eat it right off the trees any day. It's South San Jose, so it's actually at Snell and Chenoweth. More broadly, it's down 85 Blossom Hill Road. It's about 270 acres that used to be a farm. Anybody at all familiar with that area will recognize the one big farm that was still left down there. The family was there 150 years. The last of the family died and willed it to the county as a park to honor the agricultural history of the valley. So we're actually there honoring the agricultural history by growing an orchard that was sort of like was grown here years ago. So come see us.
Again, thank you so much to all of you. Take care, stay well, and happy gardening.